Hunter Biden is coming out swinging in response to his recent legal woes. The president's son launched a lawsuit against the IRS on Monday, arguing that two agents wrongfully released his tax information as they spoke with congressional investigators about a Justice Department investigation into his taxes. Biden's attorneys wrote in the suit, quote, "This lawsuit is not about the legitimacy of the IRS investigation of Mr. Biden over the past 5 years or any decision to penalize Mr. Biden for any failure to comply with his obligations under the tax laws."
Former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki suggested President Biden is heartbroken and worried about his son amid the legal woes. Let's watch.
And I think on the politics of this, millions of Americans have dealt with family members who have dealt with drug addiction, who've dealt with alcohol addiction, who have dealt with a range of addiction. My bet is right now this is a heartbroken president in the White House who is worried about his son. And we're all watching to see kind of what happens with this. So, Andrew.
I am not sure what Joe Biden being heartbroken has to do with the underlying issue.
Yeah.
The underlying issue was that there's no dispute that Hunter Biden did these crimes. He was hopeful that he was going to be able to take a plea deal that would have also insulated him from a broad range of potential criminal activities. Because he didn't get that broad protection, dropped the plea deal in its entirety, even though he could have still pursued it, avoiding jail time, but not avoiding culpability for other unnamed actions. And now what does Joe Biden's thoughts and feelings and heart have to do with any of this?
Doesn't matter at all. Look, I appreciate that Hunter Biden is trying to cater to me. He wants to portray himself as a libertarian hero. He's fighting the IRS about taxes. He's saying I can buy as many, I don't need to fill out these forms correctly to buy firearms. I want to, do drugs and just leave me in peace. All things I believe. Fewer taxes. Go ahead and buy guns. Do drugs if you want. It's none of my business. So, I get that. And again, all of those things are sideshows, as you pointed out, to the real issue we're trying to get at, which is this is not a libertarian value or a progressive value or an anyone value to engage in alleged corruption that enriches yourself or your politically connected, your father, the vice president at the time, now the president, or influencing that has some policy component that is not in the U.S. interest. So that's what we care about. That was what we were worried about. The sweetheart deal in place was going to thwart a further inquiry into that investigation, which is why the judge's eyes popped when they understood the terms of it, and it didn't go through. And Hunter Biden was unwilling to do that deal without that immunity, very, very clearly.
Exactly.
So he's trying to make this about tax. And yes, the IRS, I do believe, is weaponized all the time against, poorer Americans who, we agree on this, that they're much more likely to go after the little guys, people who are working multiple jobs, who are driving Uber and have a part-time job somewhere else and doing something else, whose taxes are confusing. If only we could make our tax system less confusing to people who get entrapped in this system.
They know how much we owe.
They know how much we owe.
Just tell me. It's the H&R. It's the tax preparers that spend so many millions of dollars lobbying to prevent them from just making the process so much easier.
Preach it, sister.
Yeah, and to your point, it's Humphreys County, Mississippi, which is the most heavily audited county in the United States, and it's one of the poorest counties in the United States. I would hope
Washington, D.C. would be the most audited place in the country.
Now, we do have a little bit of a difference of opinion on how to make that better. The argument the Democrats have been making is that hiring more auditors will allow them to have the bandwidth to do the more sophisticated kinds of audits that rich people have because they're better at hiding their taxes. And the part of the reason why there's been a shift over the last 10 years from when many more rich people were audited versus poor people, that coincides with a stripping of funds and personnel from the IRS. I'm sensitive to people who say, well, if the IRS is bad, why would we fund the IRS more and get more agents? I do think there should be some barriers put on how many, quotas even put on how many people in lower income groups versus higher income groups should be audited. But something certainly needs to be done. But to get back to this Hunter Biden lawsuit, so his allegation, as I understand it, is that in the closed door meetings with Mr. Shapley and Mr. Zeiler, the two IRS whistleblowers, that they, quote, provided unsubstantiated and selectively chosen allegations of nefarious but potentially criminal behavior. And gave over information that they were not supposed to have given over. Now, these were closed door conversations that were closed door in part to protect the sensitive financial information of Hunter Biden. And it also seems that the lawsuit is asking for, Biden is eligible for $1,000 in statutory damages for each unauthorized disclosure, and also unspecified punitive damages. So it does feel a little empty. $1,000 for disclosure. I mean, at the end of all of this, even if he's successful, this isn't about that. It does seem to be one of these kind of defensive lawsuits.
You're totally right.
Where you're trying to basically harass or pressure somebody
he's
into leaving you
retaliating
alone.
against whistleblowers, people who came forward, who spoke on the record about how this investigation was hamstrung by the DOJ. This is important. This is information obviously in the public interest. Look, as a private citizen, he should be entitled to privacy, but he's not. He's operating this middle ground because of who his father is. And I'm sorry, it's in the public's interest for these whistleblowers to make us known of facts that they think were relevant for how this case was handled, because it has bearing on the policies of the president of the United States. He's not just some guy. Right, if he's just some guy, in his some guy component, fine, we don't care about the firearm charge or anything else that much. He should be able to live his life. Some of the, embarrassing photos of him, that's gross. Leave him alone. But this is the element of this where we can't just leave him alone, because we have to understand how decisions he made might have affected his father. Politically,
do you think it helps Joe Biden for Hunter Biden to be bringing this lawsuit and shoving this issue back into the news?
No. No, it doesn't. But Hunter Biden doesn't seem to care about what is good or bad for dad politically. And say what you will about Joe Biden, but it doesn't seem like Joe Biden is putting much pressure on Hunter to play ball or do something different to make this issue go away. Right?
I agree. I mean, people were noting around the time that Hunter Biden chose not to take the modified plea deal, that at that moment, the interest of Biden Sr. and Biden Jr. diverged. Now, we haven't seen any behavior from Biden Sr. that would suggest that he's going to at all take an adversarial position to his son. If there's any pressuring for him to take a back seat, to take a different kind of plea deal, to at least quiet this down until after the election, we haven't seen anything publicly that would indicate that. And in fact, this lawsuit seems to suggest that Hunter Biden is very happy to continue to go on the offensive. I do wonder if there's going to be a limit to how much Hunter Biden can kind of poke the bear before Joe Biden, out of a sense of self-preservation. And in the sense I'm sure that he has, that his candidacy is important to the integrity of the country and democracy and all the things the Democrats say, to say, well, I'm going to put that ahead of your interest as my son. I've offered you a lot of discretion and latitude, but enough is enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. We will wait to see if that happens, and we'll have more Rising right after this.